we had static diorite problem, and then we talked about a bit about model formulation, about the objective function, and then started with the dynamic version of it. And we said that the dynamic one is a bit easier to solve because of this loss of NP hardness, at least a bit, because you are only planning for the next 10-15 minutes. So there's some kind of upper bound what could happen in the next 10-15 minutes, but still it's pretty hard to solve, but it's not that NP hard as it was in the static version. Just recap maybe. So we had why do we need actually a dynamic version? It's because only few requests are known in advance. So we said that especially after the morning round of the doctors, they are calling and asking for some kind of additional diagnostic tasks, surgeries or whatever. So we know it actually only in the morning. Then of course we could face some kind of unforeseen events, some kind of emergencies, but also that we cancel a request because the patient might be not stable enough for transportation, and we could face also longer treatment duration than expected. Okay, and also the transport duration could be not known in advance. So we need pretty high flexibility of planning. That means we need a dynamic version where we re-optimize our schedules, where we re-optimize our routes based on the new information that comes in. Okay, so we need some kind of continuous re-optimization, okay, dynamically to new information, okay, as it becomes available. And then we had these requests that have different characteristics. So we have priorities if the patient or the request is an emergency patient or a low patient that should be picked at this day, sometime, and then brought to a medical ward during the afternoon, for instance. But we could have also time windows for pickup and delivery. Often we know that a patient should be at 10 a.m. at the surgical ward. This is known. The problem is the mobility of the patient. Some need a kind of wheelchair, someone needs maybe stretchers and so on. So we have also to differentiate between the patients and the required equipment, incubator, oxygen. Is it an intensive care unit patient that requires more equipment than the others? And then we have this chain of requests. I said before, last time, when they're calling and asking for transportation, they know that they need some kind of additional nurse, additional physician, the patient requires particular assistance and so on. So first of all, let me choose pointer. So that means first of all, we have to pick up a physician or a nurse. So even if we just know this, so the patient should be at 10 a.m. at the surgical ward, and then indirectly we know when we have to pick them up, and we also know whom to pick up first, which nurse, which physician came, and then after that we of course have to deliver the physician back. Okay, and in the case of transportation of infectious patients, we also have to take into account that after the patient has been delivered, we need some time for disinfection for the entire car. Okay, so it takes some time. We cannot use this vehicle in the next coming, 1 hour. Okay, and this chain of requests, that cannot be interrupted. We cannot make intermediate stops. We cannot pick up additional patients and so on. So this cannot be interrupted. And I don't know if it will work, but I don't think so. Maybe, but I can try just to show. Okay, it was anyway open. So I also don't
Mach mit beim Check24 EM-Tippspiel.
Hol dir jetzt noch das Check24 Deutschland-Trikot gratis.
Nur noch
10 Tage
auf Check24.
Sorry for for that. I thought it could be also, wait, why? The good thing is that sound is working, that's perfect. And now you are in a perfect mood for the European Championship, and we cannot see that one. Okay, I have to figure out why it's not sent. It was just, okay, we'll figure it out later. So it was just to show you, it was a very, very short video where, sorry. Okay, does it now work? Yeah, it was just a very short video. Oh wait, maybe from this? No, it doesn't show, okay. Yeah. Okay, so okay, so nothing fancy, just how intensive care units patients transported from one room to the other room and then to the vehicle. So there's a lot of equipment that has to be adjusted, that has to be put in and off and so on. So it's not that easy to simply go to the patient care unit and simply take the patient and transform to the vehicle. Okay, that was just a very short video. I tried to figure out how, for the next time, because I like videos, how to do that. Okay. So, next one. Okay. Okay, we're on track again. So, for every request, and when I talk about request and patient, I often use them interchangeably. However, a request obviously could also contain several patients. Okay, so if someone is calling and saying, we have 3 patients that have to be transported to the medical care unit. Okay, and this is still one request consisting of 3 patients. But often I use it interchangeably just to make it rather simple. So, okay, so for every request, we know the earliest desired pickup time or the latest desired delivery time, okay? And the corresponding location to this pickup or delivery location, this is then called critical location. So if we know that the patient has to be at 10 a.m. at a particular ward, this is then the critical location. And then we are calculating backwards and know, okay, if he has to be there at 10, then we have to pick them up at latest 9:30, whatever. Okay. And then the time windows are calculated then on this specific time for critical location using either, take my laser pointer, so either maximum allowed deviation from the specified time. For instance, if it's a high priority patient, an intensive care unit patient, then we know that we have to have small deviations from the specified time because it could be critical. And also using the direct ride time from the pickup to delivery, so we know that the patient shouldn't spend too much time in the vehicle. Okay, this has also to be taken into account when we define these time windows. Okay, and then in this chain of requests, the critical location is always the first stop. Of course, we cannot have some kind of intermediate stops in between, so we know that we have to go directly to this one, so it not necessarily refers to the physical stop, but rather the priority in planning and also scheduling. Okay. Okay, then we have penalty costs, but these are only valid for deviations for the critical locations. Okay. Okay. So actually, only the time critical appointments are these that are relevant and that we would like to avoid some kind of deviations from that. Okay, so what kind of assumption do we have? First of all, vehicles could be located at different depots, not necessarily, but especially large hospitals, like also in Karlsruhe Hospital, they have several depots, okay? And that means we have to plan with vehicles that are located in different locations, so we have to take this into account. Then each vehicle is available during a particular period of time, but There could be some kind of service interruptions, for instance, rest periods for the drivers, like lunch breaks, something like this, maintenance activity also. Okay, so we guarantee that they could have breaks at desired start time. Okay, so they tell us, okay, we would like to have lunch at 12, and we try to assure that they can do their lunchtime in this time frame, but we allow some kind of deviations from this with given tolerance. Okay, they could start earlier or a little bit later after they deliver the last patient. Then they could have their lunch. And during work breaks, of course, vehicles are located at the original depot, because in Germany it's often a prerequisite that if they are empty, they must return to their depot. This is often because to avoid idling time at the pickup location, to avoid also congestion, for instance, and also ensure that vehicles are available at the depot. Okay, so that means only if you have patients on board, only then you are allowed to wait at a pickup location if you are too early. If the vehicle is empty, you have to go back to your depot. Okay, you are not allowed to wait in front of the pickup location. Okay. We will have it also in the exercise. Okay, and then we have different loading options per vehicle. We talked about it also last time. We could have 3 seats, so we could travel with 3 normal patients, let's say normal, or we could have 2 seats and a stretcher, or 2 wheelchairs without stretcher. So often these vehicles are pretty flexible, to some extent at least. And they need some kind of different equipment, ECG devices, oxygen tanks, masks, and so on, especially for the intensive care unit patients. Okay, so then we have these kind of constraints in the model that are not formulated in algebraic form here, just to have it verbally. So visiting constraints, each pickup and delivery location is visited only once. So the question is the same, was it the same in the static problem? Can you remember that when you think about the constraints? Are these constraints visiting constraints, so that each pickup and delivery location is visited only once? Is it also covered by the static version of the DARP, dial right problem from last time? Maybe you remember? And nodding or shaking their head is also fine. You can also check it, some previous slides. Visiting concern. So does it, first of all, maybe does it make sense to have that locations are visited only once, the pickup and delivery location? Does it make sense? And so the original question was it covered already by the static version? I think we had that, cannot remember the slide number, but we had that previous version. Yep. It wasn't? Mm-hmm. It's a bit tricky formulated, right? But it was also covered in this static version, because the request, so indirectly it means a request can only be covered and serviced once. Okay, so that was also the case in the static version. Then we have the depot constraints. Route of each vehicle starts and ends at the depot. I think I draw a bad figure here with notes from depot to the end depot. So was that covered by the static version? Yeah, exactly. Capacity constraints. Vehicle and equipment capacity cannot be exceeded. Perfect, thanks. Pairing constraints. Pickup and delivery location visited by same vehicle. Was it also covered by the static version? So that we pick up one patient and bring them to the delivery location. and not changing the vehicles in between. Yeah, exactly. So that was also in the static version. Then precedence constraints. Each patient is picked up before being dropped off. Was it also formulated before? Yeah, exactly. Then patient inconvenience constraint. Time elapsed between pickup and delivery of each patient cannot exceed a given maximum ride time. Was it before? Yeah, exactly. That was also the case. And now the resource constraint. Service periods of vehicles must be respected. Deviations from desired begin of break periods cannot exceed given tolerance. Was this so included? Did we include breaks in the static version we covered last time? Exactly not. That's new. This is the new constraint for the dynamic version. And hospital service constraint requests for single transportation must be fulfilled, and the sequence of stops in each chain of requests must be satisfied without intermediate visits. Is that new? Or did we have in a static version, so that we now respect the chain of requests? Is it new? New dynamic for this, new constraint type for this dynamic version? Or did we have it before? Who's for new? Okay. Who's for it was there before? It's only a binary answer possible, either yes or no. So who is not raising their hands? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is also a new constraint. So I don't know if I can. This is always really awful how I do it. So this is all in the static version. Oh no. So I don't think it makes sense. So this is the static, and here, down here, these are the new. This is the dynamic version of it. So do you have an idea what could be missing? Or let's say this is already, so every model is some kind of unrealistic representation, right? So there's always something missing in some sense. And this is pretty comprehensive already. So maybe you have another idea what could be included in this constraint, in this model. What kind of constraint types would you say is missing, or would you like to see, or could be beneficial, could be appropriate also to consider? Some kind of idea, just a spontaneous, I mean, I don't expect an elaborated answer, just maybe a spontaneous idea. What do you think, what is missing? Or not necessarily missing, but what would be appropriate? Yes? Exactly. Yeah, exactly, perfect. So if you think that your statistics showed that if you travel more than these kilometers, the probability of breakdown will be pretty high, so they need some kind of break and to include maintenance in between. Yeah, perfect. Or maybe some kind of planning the picking up the patient back to the ward. They have some kind of diagnostic appointment. They are for half an hour there, and they are picking up them instantly on the way back. So just to include them from the beginning on, instead of dealing with that as a own and single request. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So the objectives are now, first of all, to minimize direct and indirect operating costs. So we could have these costs for traveling times of vehicles, but also some kind of penalty costs for violating if we are not within the time windows of critical locations. Because if you pick up the patients too early, you have idle times for the vehicle because they're waiting for the patient to arrive. the other way around. If you are too late, then of course the patient has to wait, but also staff and also the equipment are underutilized. Okay, so these are penalty costs that cannot be measured in euros maybe, but definitely efficiency problems. And on the other hand, we have the patient inconvenience that we would like to avoid. So of course the total travel time between pickup and delivery if the patient is spending too much time in the vehicle. And also, as before, the violation of time windows. Again, we have these late pickups and late delivery. Every time the patient has to wait, either waiting for the vehicle to be picked up or waiting because another patient took their place, and then they have to wait until a new slot is open for their treatment. Okay. So at the end of the day, we have multi-objective criteria. We have total travel time, and would like to, and at the same time, to minimize total lateness. So we don't want to be delayed, not for the patient, but also not for the vehicles and not for the transportation staff. And we would like to minimize the total earliness, because to be early is also might also not be that appropriate. Okay. And maybe the question to you, how to deal with that. So you have a multi-objective model. Okay. Would you simply sum them up? So you have on one hand travel time plus lateness plus earliness. Would you put it like that? Would you formulate it like that in your algebraic formulation? What would it mean if you just sum them up? Which is not, yeah, please. Exactly. So the question is, what is more important? So we should also include some kind of weights, because we think maybe the total lateness is more important than total earliness. Okay, and this is why we would also include some kind of weight to make a prioritization between them. Okay, so the objective criteria, first of all, the projected total travel time, so the total time the vehicle is spending on the road from the morning till the evening. Penalty costs for expected lateness, but only for the critical locations. If we have some kind of time windows that are not critical, because we have some kind from 8 till 12, we should pick the patient up to be on time somewhere in the evening. That is absolutely fine, then there are no penalty costs. But if this is critical and the patient has some kind of priority, then we have some kind of penalty costs that are not really real, but for the modeling. And then we model this as a piecewise linear function. And the penalty costs for expected earliness, they are modeled as a linear function. Can you remember why? Why don't we have some maybe linear penalty costs for everything, to be late and to be too early? Why do we differentiate between the lateness and the penalty costs for earliness? What do you think? We had that before at one slide. So why do we differentiate between these two types of penalty costs? Why not simply having a linear? So the more we are waiting, the more we are too early, the more penalty costs arise. Why do we differentiate between that? Yeah, so linear function is something like that, and piecewise is so parts, so from here to here it's linear, from here to here it's linear, and from here to here it's linear. Okay, so this means that you have some kind of breaks in between. Can you see that? Oh man, okay. It's not optimal, okay, I agree. So, but the question, yeah, please? Exactly. Exactly. So we had this example with a bus, you know. So if you are too early, it's inconvenient, but it's somehow okay. If you are 1 second too late, then the costs for you are pretty high. And we had this figure where we said, okay, this is you have this time window where everything is accepted, and then before that, if you are too early, then you have some kind of linear, like a linear function that here, and then we had when you start getting too late, then you have this kind of piecewise, you know, and then whatever, you know. So we have pretty, we can also have a deeper rise here, okay, but we have this differentiation between being too early, the time window is fine, and being too late, and then you have at the beginning especially you have increased penalty costs, and then at one point you have significant increased costs because the health status could deteriorate, and then at one point maybe it's not that relevant anymore because anyway you are dead or something like this. You know, so at one point it's still linear, but doesn't make so much sense anymore. It's not that steep anymore. Okay, and we had this figure already when we talked about the bus example, being too early, being too late. Okay. So the objective is, and that was absolutely correctly formulated, we minimize the weighted sum of the three criteria. So the next question is how to set the weights. But this is the problem of the decision maker. So the hospital has to decide what is their priority. Okay, so the problem is still that this dynamic problem is still NP complete. Okay, we know that which doesn't, so NP means, we had that before, that the solution can be verified easily, so in polynomial time, and NP complete problems are the hardest within this this class. So if you have many requests, many patients that you would like to transport, then you have again a problem, even if you only consider a short time frame of 10 or 15 minutes. So the question is now, we would like to control planned routes, but also adapt to new requests. So we require some kind of extremely high flexibility that we can change our routes and schedules on the fly. And then we have some kind of trade-off between the solution quality of one hand and the response time on the other hand. So of course we would like to have the optimal routes for everyone. The patients don't have to wait too long, we don't have idle times, we don't have empty trips, and so on and so on. But on the other hand, if you are planning for the next 10-15 minutes and the request is coming in right now, you need right now the solution. Okay, you cannot wait for, let's say, half an hour till you get the optimal solution. Then it's done. Okay, so this is the trade-off we have to take. And then, of course, we would like to use heuristics. And the one idea how to do that is, first of all, having some kind of construction heuristic, which means just to determine feasible solution, just to determine something that might be not optimal, but you know that the patient will be picked up and you know that the patient will be delivered. This is the highest priority, to have some kind of route that is feasible. So you have 20 requests in the morning, and then your line is silent for the next 15 minutes, and then this is the time you can improve your route. But if you have a lot of requests in between, then you simply don't have the time. Okay. So first of all, you need a feasible solution, a feasible route and schedule, and then depending on the next request that arrives, you might have the time to improve that. Okay. And often this is done by the taboo search. I think you might know that and you might be familiar with that. It's similar to local search, basically. Okay, we had that before. So in peak times, especially after the morning round, it's rather to be, just to do it. Okay, it's not optimal, everyone knows that, but at least you are doing the routes. Okay, and then after the peak time is done and you get some kind of request, then you can start to reassign, you can reschedule, you can modify it to improve your routes. Okay, and how does it work? Let's start with a construction heuristic. So we start with this one to determine just a feasible solution, and this is divided by different phases. So the phase 1 in this construction heuristic is simply to assign the request to vehicles. Okay, so you have 7 vehicles, you have 20 requests, just assign them to some kind of vehicle. It doesn't matter, simply do this clustering. And then the second phase is create feasible routes. So when you assign them requests to the vehicles, think of how to reach the delivery routes and delivery locations, so that this is feasible at least. If you have, if you are done, so if you don't get any kind of new requests in, or you do, then insert these new requests into your schedule. So therefore you have to modify your routes and your schedules. So this is the dynamic version of it. And if you don't have any new requests anymore, then simply stop. Okay. So the first phase of this heuristic is simply, yeah, please. Sorry. Well, I think it is already the loudest, but I tried. Okay, wait. Maybe the batteries are off. I don't know. It's 100%. Okay, I try. Okay, is it better? Better? Huh? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Oh yeah, you're right. Now I hear myself. Okay. So that this is the basic construction heuristic. So the first phase is just to cluster. So you have, after the morning round, 20 requests, and the first phase of this construction algorithm is simply to say which vehicle should cover which requests. Okay, so this is the first step, and this is some kind of basic load balancing algorithm, which means that maybe you have already a route because it's 11 a.m. and you have already a route, some kind of feasible route from 8, 9, 10 a.m. Okay, so you have already a constructed route. Okay, and then when we start phase 1, some of the unvisited stops in such a vehicle route cannot be removed. Okay, we cannot throw some patients out of the vehicle because we have a better plan. Okay, so this is not possible, and therefore we have to respect the previous schedule. And this pre-assignment, so the next destination is already determined. So we know that the vehicle will go to node 4, something like this. Okay, we cannot change that, and we also know that the delivery locations of the patients. Okay, so we have them on board, and we know that these patients have to be delivered to node 6, whatever. Okay, so we cannot change that. These are pre-assigned routes and schedules. And the phase 1 is only concerned with load balancing, so we want to be as fair as possible. Okay, so we want to assign workload evenly over all vehicles. Okay, we are only interested in assigning the workload evenly, so that is as fair as possible. Okay, so that means that it may happen in this phase, in this first phase, when we cluster all the requests, that some of the requests cannot be assigned. Okay, because otherwise one vehicle has, let's say 2 patients, the other one has 6, and fair would be to assign new requests to the vehicle with less patients, with a 2. Okay. And then we can see, okay, some vehicles are absolutely at the capacity. We cannot assign any requests anymore because all of the vehicles are full. So therefore, it could happen that we cannot assign that request. Yes? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right. This is, we will come to this in 1 minute. This is simply the beginning of this algorithm. This is the absolutely basic, just to cluster the requests to be as fair as possible, to load these vehicles to some degree for fairness. Okay, so that no one is doing more jobs than the other. But what you just mentioned, we will come to this in 1 minute, how to change that and how to optimize it basically. So the algorithm is as follows. So first of all, sort all unserved requests by decreasing priority and increasing desired pickup time. So of course we prioritize the urgent patient and those with the earliest pickup time. Okay, so a patient has a high priority and requests a pickup at 10 a.m. This will be, of course, served before a low priority patient that requests at 2 p.m., something like this. So pretty intuitive. And then for each unserved request I, first of all, find all suitable vehicles to service requests. So we have to check if the capacity is there, if we have the equipment that is necessary for this particular patient or this particular request, and then, of course, check the temporal availability. And then sort these vehicles by increasing a number of assigned requests, so the degree of busyness. So this is basically the workload balancing here. So a vehicle with least assigned requests get the patient or will get the request first. Okay, so as the same example as before, one vehicle with 2 requests, the other one with 7. Of course, we will first assign the request to the vehicle with 2 patients. Okay, otherwise it wouldn't be fair. So this is the point where we are doing the load balancing. And then the last one is assign request I to the first feasible vehicle if pickup is likely to occur within this time window. So not necessarily, this is not a hard constraint, but if, then assign this request to the feasible vehicle, okay, that has enough capacity and so on. Okay, so an example here, we have vehicle 1, okay, that is serving the first request and the second request. So we are here in time period T, so maybe it's 11 a.m. So we know vehicle 1 has already picked up the first patient and the second patient. Again, I use that as a patient, but it's actually request 1 and request 2. But for simplicity, I say just the first patient and the second patient. And we know that they will be delivered after T, here and here. So first of all, the first patient, and then after that, the second patient. And we have a second vehicle, and this vehicle picked up the third patient and already delivered the third patient. So at time T, the vehicle 2 is free, okay? So we have 3 patients or 3 requests that have already been served. Okay, so this is done. We cannot change that anymore, okay? Because this is assigned and we know that they will pick up. But the second vehicle is free. So the plan is actually to pick up the 4th patient here and deliver them here. But now a 5th request comes in. Okay, and we know we have 2 vehicles, 1 and 2. And we know that this is the first step we do. We sort the vehicles according to the load. So the second vehicle, it has only 1 assigned request, and the first one 2 assigned requests. Okay, so we sort that, and then we can assign the request 5 to the first to F2, because we only have 1 request here, and a delay is unlikely. We always have to check also the other constraints, if the capacity is enough and so on. Okay, so but assuming that everything is fine and the delay is unlikely, we can assign the request 5 to the second patient here. Okay. If not, then we cannot assign request 5. Okay. Some questions to this example? Okay, so the thing what we would like to do is to have this kind of load balancing to have a fair, because it wouldn't be fair if we also would assign request 5 to the first vehicle, okay? Because it has already 2 patients on board, and then saying to them, please pick another patient would be unfair, because currently F2 is empty. It covered that one. It has to pick up another patient, but can also take a second patient. Okay, so this is only concern of load balancing. So the second phase of this heuristic is now to construct feasible routes. Okay, so now we know which vehicle are covering which node and which request, and now we want to know the route and also the schedule. At 8:10 the vehicle should be here, and then to deliver the patient at 8:25. Okay, so to find feasible solution and feasible routes, we start with the possible heuristics that could be used. So for each vehicle, U, V, A, B, C, whatever, and each request, we determine the pickup and also the delivery times using the following. Either we are a manual dispatcher, then we simply use the first fit. First fit means just to put the new request to some possible feasible point in the route. So the first one I can find, so that we don't violate any constraint, because the capacity window constraints or something like that. And this method is pretty straightforward and also quick. But of course, you know that from the previous manual handling that not necessarily produce an optimal solution. Or we can use a best fit. So all possible insertion points are evaluated, okay, but only those that don't modify, okay, and don't change the estimated arrival and departure times of the already scheduled stops, that they are considered, okay. And then among these, we choose the best alternative. That could be weighted sum of total earliness, lateness, travel time, whatever what is most important for the hospital. So with this algorithm, we don't change the pre-assignment, okay? Or we use the best insert algorithm, which is pretty similar to the best fit, but it also allows the adjustments, okay, in the estimated arrival and departure times of already planned stops, okay? We can adjust the pre-assigned routes and pre-assigned schedules. And then again, the best insertion point is then selected according to the same criteria. Okay, so let's have a look at this best insert algorithm. How does it work? So for each vehicle V, we have already some kind of assigned requests. And now we would like to sort these requests by increasing so the earliest pickup time, so the earliest, the more urgent it is. And for each request, we determine the stops to be visited and to determine every feasible insertion point, first of all, just to get a feasible route, so that the delivery takes place after pickup, which is, of course, for us pretty intuitive and logical, but not for the algorithm. Okay, so we explicitly have to tell the algorithm, don't deliver the patient before you pick them up. Okay, then the capacity constraints cannot be exceeded, and the maximum driving time is also restrictive. Okay, and then for each feasible route, you determine the total lateness, earliness, travel time, okay, and then of course select the best route based on some kind of objective function. In this case is the weighted sum of lateness, earliness, and also the distance. Okay, and maybe an example for this one. So for all, let's say we have request 1, we know, so the request is to be picked up first of all, then to pick up the second patient and to deliver them deliver at least the first patient here. So again, we are at time period T. Then we have a second request. Okay, this is the blue circle here. Okay. And this patient has to be delivered after the delivery of the first patient. So the order is fixed here. And then we have a third request. So after time t, okay, we get a third request, a new one. Okay, so we have this route that is already done and assigned, and now we would like to check, maybe it is beneficial to simply add the third request at the end of this route. That could be beneficial. Or what we also can do, we pick the first, we deliver the first patient, and then we are going and pick up the third request before delivering the second patient or the second request. Okay? This is also an alternative. Or the third one is, we do the request in between, and after that is covered, then we go to and deliver the second patient. Okay, so there are all these possibilities, they have all to be checked, and this is a very simple example. One request, only two requests that were already assigned and handled. So you can imagine how complex it is in real world when you have several requests, when you have several vehicles, several route possibilities, and of course no human will check all these routes. Okay, so human dispatcher will just choose the first that is feasible. Okay, if we can plug this request at the end of the route, it's done. Okay, they don't check if this is optimal or not. Okay, but we could still have unserved requests. So how to insert these, let's say, bad requests? So, so the general idea is first take requests which we like. So there's no delay. That was from phase 1 and 2. And now how to assign these bad requests. Okay. So first of all, again, sort unassigned request by decreasing priority again and increasing desired pickup as before. So the patient that have higher priorities and earlier pickup time, they should be prioritized. And then for each new request, find a suitable vehicle. Okay, so check again temporal availability and equipment, and for each vehicle, we determine all feasible pairs of insertion points in the current route. Okay, and then we determine the impact. So how bad is it to insert this new request into our route? Okay, and then store the route with the smallest damage, let's say, with the least impact. So as I said, we have first of all a plan with our preferred request, which we like, because anyway the bad request will worsen our solution anyway. Okay, so we have no other choice. Okay, they simply don't fit in our plan. Okay, so the idea is now to make a good plan first at the beginning, and then insert these, as I said, bad or improper requests. Okay, and empirical studies showed that this is a better approach than planning with this bad request from the beginning on and try to optimize it from the beginning on. And this is the main idea of this new algorithm, to assign first of all, or to neglect some requests and don't assign them, have a perfect plan for now, and then insert these bad requests, these improper requests at the end. This will lead to overall a better solution than dealing with them at the beginning on. Okay. So in some sense, we do some kind of unfeasible solution first, and now make it feasible. Okay, and the objective is to have the smallest damage, to have the smallest impact on our perfect routes. Okay, so this is minimized. So, okay. So, and if we have the time, so now we have some kind of feasible routes and schedules, and if we have time, if we don't get some kind of new request in between, we could improve our routes. Okay, and this is based on the following algorithm. So we do first of all an inter-route improvement. We move one patient to another route or to another vehicle, and then we check if the solution is improved. So if our route is now better. What does better mean? For instance, we have smaller lateness, okay? So if not, then we go again back to the interroute. We take another request, another patient, and move them to another vehicle, okay? If this is improved, if it does improve our route, then we go and do an intra-route improvement, which means that we will change the sequence of stop within each route. So we have done one route and then we change the request, we change the patient delivery sequence. Okay. And if the stopping criteria is fulfilled, then everything is fine. And if not, then we check so we go back and we start again with the inter-route movement first. And then after several iterations, okay, so every k iterations, we stop and do the intra-route improvement. Maybe an idea why we are doing that. So we don't. So with this improvement, with this patient move, we move patient 1 to another vehicle. The solution doesn't improve, but we did 15 iteration, and then we are forced to do the intra-route improvement. An idea why we are doing that after a particular number of iterations. Why are we going to the intra-route? Why not taking another patient or another request? What? Yeah. Exactly. We are somehow stuck in a corner of the feasible solution set. We could be stuck in some kind of local optima. So this is why we are trying to escape this local optima, to try to find a better one, a global one. So this is somehow it's called diversification, to exactly what you simply said, that to escape this local minima, to check for other better solutions overall, to find maybe even a global optima. Okay. So let's start with the inter-route improvement. So we would like to move one patient from one vehicle to another to check if this would be better for our overall route. And of course we have to find a patient in our neighborhood, because always it's some kind of taboo search, local search, or whatever. So often these are the classical heuristics. So we are searching in the neighborhood for better solutions. Okay, so we have already critical locations, and we said that with the highest temporal and spatial proximity to critical requests, I. And what does it mean, temporal proximity and spatial proximity? So temporal, of course, the evaluation of comparability of time windows. If two patients require a pickup at 2 to 30, of course, they could be swapped. Okay, they could be switched. Okay, so it depends also on the position of the critical relocation in the route. That means if they're anyway close by from a time point of view, then we can change these patients. And on the other hand, we have the spatial proximity. So that depends obviously on the direct travel times between the requests. It makes no sense to pick up one patient and travel for 1 hour for the other one. So they should be somehow close by, and depends on the order in which the critical locations are visited. Of course, this determines if they are close by or not. Okay, even if they're close by but they are not critical locations, for us that doesn't matter then anymore. Okay. Okay. So the interroute improvement. If we know what is the neighborhood, we can now start with the interroute improvement. So this is the first iteration of the improvement heuristic. Okay. So at each iteration, select request I to move out of the route, to move out of the vehicle, according to some kind of strategy. For instance, we take the patient with the maximum lateness. Okay, so we would like to avoid that. So we take the patient that would be very late at the delivery location. So we take this one. Okay. We know that the patient will be late anyway, but we try at least to reduce the delay. Okay, by moving this patient to another route, to another vehicle. Okay, so then we have to search for neighbors of this request based on, again, of temporal and spatial proximity. Okay, amongst the vehicles but again, they have enough capacity, equipment, and so on, and they are also available. Okay, so with which patient could we mix? And for each neighbor of request, calculate the objective value again for the new route and accept with the best objective value. Okay. The problem is if we said that we would like to move patient A to another vehicle, at the next iteration we cannot put him back. Okay, this is not allowed. Then it will be on a taboo list. Okay, so we cannot swap all the time the same patient again and again. Okay, so this is not allowed. So we have the best solution, at least in a given iteration number of iterations. Okay, that could be infeasible. Okay, so we implement some kind of restriction, some kind of taboo, to prevent that the request, okay, is reassigned back to its original route. That is what we don't want. Okay, at least not for a particular number of iterations. So we switch the request, we cannot switch them back in the next one. Okay, and this is again to avoid to reverse to recent, maybe a solution too soon. Okay, therefore we try again to explore new and potentially better solutions. Okay, and again the same as before, we try to avoid to be stuck in local optimas. Okay, but as I said, this best solution could be infeasible, but for now it's okay. It's okay. We will do it later, the feasibility, but for now the idea is to find the best solution. Okay, even if it's infeasible. Okay, one example, we have a new request. So we know that the critical location is picking up them here. Okay, and now we would like to find neighbors. So the neighbor of this request I is either the picking up location of patient 3 or request 3, or the delivery location of request 2. Okay. Let's check this neighborhood first of all as an example. So the first alternative is simply to insert the request I at the end. Okay, so this is the first thing we could do. Okay. However, we always have to check if the constraints are fulfilled, so if the capacity is enough. Okay. Second alternative, again, instead of putting it at the end, we would like to have them in between, or as before, we can also cover this request in between, so in the picking up and the delivery in between, and deliver the second patient at the end. Okay. And for all these alternatives, we have to check the objective function. Which one is really the best one? Okay. Okay, and then we have this taboo search. So we have some kind of inter-route move. So we move request I, patient Peter, from vehicle V to another vehicle U. So either the move is not taboo, we can do that because everything is fine. It's not on our taboo list. This is fine. Or move it, although it's on the taboo list, but because it yields such a better solution that we make an exception. And this is called aspiration criteria. So it overrides our taboo status only if a move improves the solution significantly. Okay, then we allow to do this move. Otherwise, we cannot put Peter back into that. Okay. And we allow the route infeasibility, so we simply temporarily allow infeasible solution in order to find better routes. And this is the dynamic adjustment here. Okay, this is the dynamic nature of this algorithm, where we allow an infeasible route just for now in order to find better solutions, so that the algorithm is able to find better solution. Okay, and the new route quality, of course, is then the objective function plus this penalty for feasibility violation. Okay, and the selection of new requests according to, again, maybe highest delay like before. So the next request is selected based on some kind of criteria. So that means the neighborhood of the current solution is not fully searched, and that ensures us a quick response. Okay, this is based on this dynamic environment. So we assure that we have a short response time, even if this is not really feasible at this point. Okay. And therefore we can escape local minima by adding this penalty term in the objective function. Okay, so if we perform all the time, if we move Peter again and again and again, okay, so this will be penalized, okay, in order to escape this local minimum, because obviously the algorithm cannot find a better one, so the algorithm is forced to do to pick up Claudia, for instance, and move her to another vehicle. Okay, so the algorithm is forced to do that. Okay, and of course, stop after a particular number of iterations is done, because we don't have so much time. Okay, it's also to save algorithmic time. Okay, so why do we need this diversification? It's again to escape this local minimum, so that we are not stuck. So therefore we use the taboo list to prevent cycling, in order to prevent that Peter is moved again and again. So a request that was moved from route V to route U won't be put back. So if Peter is moved to vehicle A to B, he won't be moved back to the first vehicle or first route. Okay? And the number of next iteration depends on the length of taboo list. This is a algorithmic characteristic. Okay, so this has nothing to do with the patient itself. Okay, and actually, a lot of companies are using taboo search because it's pretty efficient and time spending. This time can be really saved when using taboo search. Okay, and this aspiration criteria, as said before, to accept a taboo solution even if it's on the taboo list, and we accept this move because it leads to a better global solution, and diversification to avoid repetitive movement of patient Peter. And then we try to check also intermediate infeasible solutions to find better solutions. Okay, and this hasn't been done before, and this is also the trick and the main idea of the entire algorithm, to allow infeasible solutions first and then make them feasible again. This overall finds better solution than before. Okay, so this is the second step of the improvement heuristic. So we did the improvement several times. We checked if this route was better, or if we achieved some kind of number of iterations. And then we have to do the intra-route improvement, which is pretty simple. So the main idea is simply change the sequence of requests within one route. So choose simply the first request, okay, and move it to somewhere else, okay. So remove the request, so take the request out of the current route and check all feasible possible new positions to be put back into the route, okay. And for each new position, also identify every possible pair, again, this kind of pair of points where the request could be inserted. Again, determine the total lateness, delay, whatever, what is most important for the hospital, for instance, and then repeat step 2 and 3, so move on to the next request in the route. So if we are done with the first request, we are moving to the second and so on. So we check all moves that hasn't been done before, okay, till everything is checked. And it could be that we already found the perfect route, so it could be that we cannot improve the route anymore. Okay, and that's the best route we could have. A question so far? Okay. So the one thing is to develop these kind of heuristics, to insert them, to test them, sensitivity analysis, how good is this for other problems, and so on and so on. But at the end of the day, of course, practitioner and also others would like to know, does it really work in real life? Okay, and here we had a case study. This is almost 20 years ago, so this is why we can present it here. The objective was to minimize the waiting times for patients at a Klinikum der Johannes Gutenberg Universität in Mainz. This is a really huge hospital with over 1,000 beds, 60 buildings, so we have transportation between the separate buildings, either by foot, if it's close by, or by vehicles. We could have infectious patients, also in addition. And here we see the actual minutes the patients had to wait, and you see that the bars indicate the waiting times, so the difference between the time patients were told they will be picked up and the actual pickup time. Okay, and you see here up to some patients had to wait up to 300 minutes, so you are waiting 5 hours till you will be picked up. So if you have a surgery or some kind of diagnostic procedures where you cannot eat or drink before, and you will be told, please don't drink, don't eat before the surgery or whatever, before the treatment, and then you are waiting 5 hours, you can imagine how satisfied the patient is, okay? And so what was done is to use exactly the algorithm that was just shown, and the dynamic dial right problem was implemented, and then you can see that waiting time could be reduced by 26% by using these kind of optimization procedures. Okay, so if you are Amazon, and if you can decrease the waiting time for the customer by 26%, then you are a CRO. Then at the end, you then own this company, because what is really feasible in real life for normal companies is 2 to 3%, and this is already significant. Okay, so you can imagine that 26% is absolutely fantastic, and this is of course because this is manual dispatching, based on manual dispatching. So the human cannot be really good, and this is why you can achieve this significant decrease in waiting time using the data you have, using algorithms, using optimization models. Okay, so my former professor said every time when he told us about optimization and about collecting data and heuristics and so on, he always said the money is laying on the ground. You just have to grab it. Okay, so I would like to share that with you. If you are somewhere in a company, use optimization, use data analytics, use heuristics, because there's always potential for improvement. Okay, so you can see here a significant improvement, and here also a bit larger. And when you see here the 300, and the highest or the longest waiting time was 180 minutes, which is still a long waiting time, nevertheless, but the maximum waiting time could be reduced by 37%. This was measured on April the 7th in 2003, and the hospital, so they presented to the hospital, and they say, yeah, but it's because of the 7th of April. This is you are lucky with a date. So what they have done was to check another date, so a few days later, and you can see here that the waiting time could be reduced even by almost 40%. Okay, so and they've done that over the entire year, and here you see the average times. So you see here that many patients, or let's say 35 patients waited up to 5 minutes, but there are these kind of tail here where patients, 4 patients had to wait 300 minutes, up to 300 minutes. Okay. So 7% of patients have to wait more than 2 hours. And this is really significant. And with the new optimization models, you could see that the tail, you put it here more to this one and have less over here. Here's only 1 patient waited up to 240 minutes, again, which is still a high number, but overall waiting times could be reduced. Okay, so we have transportation time that could be reduced by 10% and waiting time by even 20%, okay? And therefore we could increase the patient satisfaction, okay? Although it might be not quantitatively measurable.